to those ranks.
Mr. Gordhan, I mean, if I could just put in, I suppose, the obvious question at this stage in economic history, which is at what point or to what extent is Europe preying on all of your minds at the moment? I mean, the future of the Eurozone does seem to be rather hanging like a sword of Damocles over the rest of the global economy, doesn't it? How's it going to affect you if Europe does take a plunge?
Well, the United States affected all of us post-2008, and the new epicenter of the crisis in Europe and the Eurozone in particular is having a damaging spillover effect on our economies, partly because they are major trading partners, but more importantly, Europe is actually dictating the risk mindsets and investment mindsets at this stage, which means that each time European leaders refuse to or unable to make the right decisions in terms of capitalizing their banks or in terms of allowing the European Central Bank to intervene or not intervene, either in favor of banks or the sovereigns, we have capital flows moving either into our economies or rapidly out of our economies to so-called safe havens. And this has major disruptive effects on our economies, our currencies, and that kind of volatility is not useful. But European leaders don't seem to be hearing the rest of the world. They don't seem to have the political capacity to both manage their own backyards on the one hand and ensure that they don't damage the rest of the world on the other hand.
Praveen is absolutely right. If you take Nigeria, for instance, 60% of the demand for our product comes from Europe and the US at the moment, although we are trying to diversify markets as well. And so what happens there is of a direct consequence to us. And I think it translates exactly through volatility in the prices of the commodities and products that we export, and volatility in our currencies, even in our stock market.
So it's not just the fate of the relatively wealthier Europeans at stake here?
No. When these decisions are being made, you mustn't forget the other countries in the world who are your trading partners. And, the developing countries that are also contributing strongly. We need to look at how can we make more use of their dynamism in order to support the rest of the world.
Mr. Gordhan, is China, Russia, Brazil going to bail you out of this problem?
I don't know. I think the word bailout applies at your end of the world, not at our end of the world. With great respect.
We are bailing people out.
We are, and that's the point I just wanted to make. It's the developing countries that are bailing the developed part of the world out at this point in time. And what we are now having is the sinking developed world, which is pulling the rest of the world down, rather than managing the situation in a way in which the floating effect and the buffering effect that the developing countries' economies have been providing over the last few years being sustained, that buffering effect is in fact being damaged. So all of our economies are now sliding, whether we are in China, in Brazil, in India, or wherever we might be. And that is going to have massive consequences in terms of the overall global outlook. So we hope that at some stage soon, sense will prevail, that self-interest takes a backseat, and that mutual interest begins to become a more dominant part of the considerations that will be taken into account. Otherwise, we are forsaking all the wonderful opportunities we have to put billions of people on a better footing in terms of their lives and create a situation where we have a really depressing decade ahead of us.
May I add to that one thing? Very humbly, I also want to submit that the developed countries can look at some of the lessons that come from the work that the developing countries have done or are doing and ask the question, why are these economies now rebounding and sustaining growth? It's because many of our economies, even in Africa, have gone through some of the challenges that the developed world is now going through. We've learned lessons, and I think that if you look at the BRICs, you look at what has happened in countries in East Asia, there's a lot to be learned about, managing the financial sector. Even from Africa, we've learned which policies make for good policies. We've learned to keep our debt at a sustainable level and to be consistent in terms of the way we manage our macroeconomy. And I think there are a few lessons there from the financial sector and from macro that could be offered.
Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Nigeria's finance minister, and before her, Praveen Gordhan, the Finance Minister of South Africa, with, I think you'll agree, some eye-catchingly stern words for the European Union. I referred those comments back once again to Jim O'Neill of Goldman Sachs when I spoke to him earlier. He told me it was a measure of the depth of feeling out there about the destabilising threat that Europe poses.
The Eurozone crisis is probably the biggest crisis within Europe economically since my career started 30 years ago. That being said, it is quite interesting that even within the euro area, the German economy is not that weak. We've had some reasonably strong indications on unemployment in Germany recently, for example. So other countries have to be a bit more focused on not just simply using the euro area as a substitute for any internal problems. There are huge problems there, but they're not the cause of everybody else's. Over the next 12 months, the 4 BRIC countries collectively will probably create the equivalent of another Italian economy. So in a global economics context, people are exaggerating the importance of the euro area. If we have a full-blown banking crisis with major banks being unable to function, that will spread contagion across the whole of the global financial market, and it would be really destabilising. But at the moment, I think the world, whilst weaker because of it, is coping and will cope just fine.
Jim O'Neill there, the man who gave us the BRICs acronym. So tell us what you think. Is the Eurozone spoiling the party, as South Africa's finance minister seems to suggest? world.business@bbc.co.uk.
You've been listening to Business Daily. If you want more insights into the world of business, you can download World Business Report from bbc.com/podcasts. If you want to contact us, you can email at world.business@bbc.co.uk or add your comments to our Facebook page at facebook.com/bbcbusiness. And remember, for news in an instant, you can follow us on twitter.com/bbcbusiness.